Hi guys, hi, how's it going? How you doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I am doing another one of my best and worst eyeshadow in the palette videos in which I go through all the palettes in a certain brand's collection that I have and show you, in my opinion, which of those shades are the best and which of those shades are the worst in each one of the palettes that I have. I got some feedback on one of my other videos and I thought, well, this one will be a super easy one to just get recorded and get out there. So I am recording today for Glamlite. These are all the palettes that I have from Glamlite Cosmetics. There's not very many of them, so I thought that I would go ahead and film my Glamlite ones today. With that said, if that sounds like something you're interested in, please keep on watching. Thank you so much for joining. For those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I'm a lover of all things high-end, colorful beauty and self-care. I also work in the beauty industry as a field leader for Ulta. You get a lot of education in my position. I like to bring you that education here. But ultimately, I'm just out here talking about makeup because I like to talk about makeup. It soothes my soul. I'm thinking it probably soothes your soul also. So let's just jump into that soothes our soul. Today, we're going to go through best and worst shade for Glamlite. And as you can see, I don't have very many palettes. There are two in this box. I've got both the Paint and the Paint Pro. But then I have the Cake palette, I have the Chucky palette, and I have the Michaela palette, the first one. With that said, I also have the Michaela Pot 2, but I haven't used Michaela Pot 2 yet, so I can't really speak to that. So there are only 5 palettes for us to go through today. I am going to start with the Paint and the Paint Pro. Number one, I love Glamlite as a brand. I think that they are fantastic as a brand, and I would have more from them, but I did have the donut palette, the Glam donut palette, the pink and the blue and the whatnot. It just wasn't a palette that I needed, and it was one that I felt like I could get rid of and not feel a certain way about. So that one my daughter does have. I initially got interested in Glamlite because of these palettes. The paint palettes that look like a painter's palette, because I also paint on the side. It's something that I enjoy doing. And these were just, I mean, look at how cute these are. Glamlite also always has some of the best packaging. So let's walk through the best and worst shadows in each one of these palettes. And for this one, which is the Glamlite Paint Pro, I think the best shade for me was this red. I don't know. I am a sucker for a red eyeshadow that is a really good red. This one is called Crimson Red. And I mean, just look at that on my finger. And the worst would have to be this one here, which, if you can tell, I'm just very tenderly touching it. This one is titanium white. And while it looks fantastic and pretty and duochromatic, which it is awful in practice. So this one is Crimson Red. What? Like, what? What I would say is every single one of the mattes in this palette specifically, I loved. I don't think that there was any one of them that didn't function in the same way that this one just functioned. What I would say is I think that there's a bit of redundancy in this palette from one shade to the next, but the opacity is crazy. This one, the worst shade, Titanium White, listen, it's pretty. It looks pretty, okay? But it is too creamy. It is way too creamy. It, number one, doesn't want to come off because it's so chunky that the flakes just stick to you wherever they are. And because it's so chunky, it's also flaky, fallout central from that shadow, and you can't get the flake off. And additional to that, it reminds me of a Super Shock shadow in its creaminess, but it is far too moist in its creaminess, and it doesn't stay. It literally creeps and crawls everywhere. There's an exacerbation of texture that is created because of it. It wasn't my favorite. I was super, super sad because it is beautiful. Beautiful. It just doesn't operate the way I really want it to in an eye look. the way anybody would want it to in an eye look. Then we have the paint palette. I would say that best in this one was probably this guy here. Oh my gosh, such a beautiful shimmer shadow. And then worst in this one, I would say, is probably this white. Again, maybe it's just something that Glamlite has that it doesn't know what it's doing, and that is whites. But this green is called light green. Isn't that beautiful? It's also moist enough that it works like a super shock, but stiff enough that it stays where it needs to stay. Beautiful, and I would say most of the shimmers in this palette are also the same way. The white I didn't love because of just how chunky it was and how like lackluster it was. It wasn't because of exacerbation of texture for this one, and it wasn't because it moved all over the place. I think that this shimmer white is much better than this shimmer white, but I also don't like a gold, so the fact that it went from white to gold is whatever it is. That is a preference thing, but this one was just so lackluster as opposed to the rest of the shimmers in this palette. And even the pure pigmentation of the mattes in this palette, like it just felt like it didn't belong. It was like, you don't go here moment for that shadow. But really beautiful shadow, but also kind of didn't fit in with I wish it would have been just a pure white. The gold was just, it was just not, it didn't go there. It shouldn't have been. The next palette I have is the Cake palette. This is probably one of my favorite palettes on the planet, or was for a very long time. Worst shadow in this palette, I would say, is green for me. I didn't love this green. This is called Key Lime. I just felt like it was really lackluster for how bright it should be. And I went with worst first, but best shade for me probably is going to be this cinnamon one right here, which is funny because that is a gold and I don't typically go for golds. But worst or best shade, cinnamon roll. Just look at how pretty that is. I typically wouldn't pick a gold shade as my favorite, but that one is like a duochrome peachy gold, and oh my god, it's so pretty, and it worked so well with all the reds and the oranges and even the brown in this shadow. This green though, called Key Lime, don't let that swatch fool you. This shadow faded so fast. It faded so fast. Yes, it's pigmented and beautiful and I loved using it, but it faded so fast. And it actually kind of oxidized also in a way that it looked really kind of like army green at the end of the day, instead of that beautiful, vibrant, like key lime green that you think it's going to be. This palette is one of my favorites though, so like I'm not mad at any part of this eyeshadow palette, but that green definitely left me wanting more. This Michaela palette, I just got done reviewing, and I had, you know, some moments with this palette that, I mean, I don't think it's worth it at all. My least favorite, let's go with best, because that's what we started at. The best shadow in this palette, I loved this one here. I also loved this one, but this one was probably my favorite. And then my least favorite, I think, was this blue. I mean, look at how much powder is in there. It just got everywhere. Hard to use, hard to blend out. It was awful. Best shade is called Nas. Look at how pretty that is. It's so pretty. It's such a beautiful eyeshadow. It was so impactful. It went with the blues. It went with the purples. I mean, it's just such a beautiful kind of like lavender silver color. So pretty. This blue not only was awful to use, but patchy and fell out all over the place. I think that you can kind of see that in the swatch. It's just not a great blue. I would say overall, all these shadows down here at the bottom were some of the worst, but these two specifically, worst shades in the palette, period. The green in here, this loop, was a really pretty green. I really liked it. The yellow was decent, but not like superb, if that makes any sense. I really had a great time with these shades here, and this one was the most surprising in the palette because I really anticipated it was going to be a really deep dark brown, but depending on what colors you're using it with, it could lean a little eggplanty, it leaned a little more bluish. I mean, it was just a really surprising shadow. I had a lot of fun with that palette, but I definitely don't think that it's one that I'm not a Michaela fan though either, or super fan. I mean, I know of Michaela, but I don't know Michaela, so I wasn't drawn to it for those reasons. I think that the people that are drawn to it for those reasons might question my thought process, but I really don't. The blue, the purple, the colors that really drew my attention in the palette didn't do them any favors. But my God, this NAS, oh my, such beautiful shadow. The last palette I have from Glamlite is the Chucky palette. This was Crazy in Love, the Chucky collaboration. I think that this had a lot of really greats to it and a lot of really beautiful shades in terms of just a really deep, dark, moody palette goes. My favorite to mess with in the palette was this one here. It is a matte, and it is kind of like this really deep burgundy, like almost dried blood burgundy red. And then my least favorite was this one here called, he's back, yeah. Really murky black that wasn't quite black. I'm gonna swatch them right here. This one is my favorite. I mean, that is so pretty. That is such a pretty shade. This one is called I Like to Be Hugged. Such a pretty, like, burnt burgundy blackberry kind of color, like so pretty and impactful to the eye looks that you put it on. And then this black, well, I think it was a pretty black. It also was supposed to have pink shimmers in it, and you can't see it. So with that said, there's also a black in this palette, and I think that it was redundant. And the reason why I'm pulling that as my least favorite is because those shimmers don't really show up. So in essence, you have this palette that has two blacks, but one of them is supposed to have pink shimmers, and the pink shimmers don't show up. So that makes it the worst in my humble opinion. I think that, I mean, this is a really great palette. I love this palette. I'm interested in their Scream one that's coming, Ghostface one that they're doing for this Halloween. We'll see. But those are my best and worst shades from all of the Glamlite palettes in my collection. I think it's funny because up here we have all these poppies of colors, and then down here we have black and red black. But that's what I got for you. That's all the palettes that I have from Glamlite right now that I can show you best and worst shade. Thank you for suggesting Glamlite as one that you wanted to see. I am so happy to bring that to you. And with that said, thank you guys so much for watching me today. I hope that you had fun. All in good fun over here. I hope that you had fun, and I hope that you had so much fun that you want to stick around and keep on watching and be a friend to my little channel here. I would love to welcome you into my YouTube fam. With that said, thank you guys so much. I hope that you and yours are doing well. I hope that you are all safe and healthy. I hope that you are all getting along as best you can in this crazy world, and that you are all loving each other, but loving each other from afar. And until next time, bye friends.